Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everybody. This is Jeff from Fluent American checking in once more on a Saturday here at the Schwab Mill, where we help you craft your accent to help achieve a more natural pronunciation in American English. You guys are going to be sending us some pronunciation files to take a look at. You can find them in the video description, or I'll be sure to post that link also in the chat. So that way, if you have a file that you would like us to take a look at, you are more than welcome to do so. Okay. So, and you can see that right now in the chat there. Okay. For those of you waiting for Jennifer, be patient. She had something come up. She's celebrating for getting some Easter plans and things like that. She will be here soon. But I do want to again walk you through the process of what it's like to send in your own pronunciation, so that way we can hear you and give you some thoughts. So give me a second. I'm going to share my screen so that way you guys can go through this whole process with me. So once you go to that link, what you're going to see is this document. In this document, you're going to see that it's going to tell you to go to a website called Vocaroo.com. Vocaroo.com will look like this. Once you sign into Vocaroo, you're going to see a big red record button. Press that record button, and then you'll be able to record your audio. You can use your phone, you can use your computer microphone, whatever is easier. Then after you press that, it's going to say save. After you save, it's going to give you this link. You put the link into our document, and we'll be good to go. So that way we'll be able to hear you. We'll be able to give you some thoughts and everything from there. If you have questions about the process, be sure to let us know. I'm trying to think of other quick things. Of course, as we go through the stream, if you have specific questions regarding American English pronunciation, you can let us know as well. And we'll be happy to do our best to try to answer all your questions related to American English. I just want to give some quick shout outs. I know Edward said, hey, a little while ago. Good to see you, sir. If you're back in the stream. Hello to Emmanuel checking in. Good to see you. Lumberjack, good to see you. Give us a moment. As soon as Jennifer arrives, we'll definitely bounce back to this question, okay? Hello to Shok checking in again. Hello to Tandra. Oh my gosh. Good to see you, sir. How to American food? Cool. Nelson is here. Hello, Nelson. You can use a tongue twister, for sure. You can use any sort of speech that you would like. Any sort that you would like. Omar, good to see you, sir. They will be in soon. Hello to Edward again checking in. And lastly, for Diva, and Elchin is here. Okay, so again, we're going to be listening to your pronunciation files. I think that kind of wraps up everything from mine in terms of the process. So let's get right into the feedback. Oh, let me add myself there, right? Again, it's not Lido, it's more little.
The G host was class.
Are you feeling that here, or here? Okay, you're going to see I have my headphones on, so that way I'll be able to hear your files and see your files as well. Let's take a look at our first one here. We're also going to try to remember timestamps because we don't want to forget that. That is important. So that way when you're watching the stream and the replay, you'll be able to find audio files very, very easily. We're going to start off with a quick one because I know some of these are a little long. 19 seconds, 25 seconds. Start off with a 3-second file.
Why are you laughing at him?
Okay, I'm going to play that once more. And then guys, as you're listening to this, you can start to think, what are some things that stand out to you? Things that you think sound natural, things that you think could use a little bit of work.
Why are you laughing at him?
Okay. If you're not sure what was being said there, close this file here. I already have some ideas, especially with regards to the pronoun at the end. But one more last time.
Why are you laughing at him?
Okay. So I think the big thing here, some things I really like, I'd really like that fast D sound. That was for instance, that atom sound, atom. So a lot of times when you have that T sound, there's a vowel before it, there's a vowel after it, and then you have that T in the middle. Very often it's going to take a fast D sound. So instead of at him, it becomes like Adam, and you can hear that at the end.
Why are you laughing at him?
Okay. So that Adam part. If you say at him, that's okay too, but maybe not the most natural sound that you're going to hear as often in North America. Just a heads up on that. The big thing that stands out to me here
Why are you laughing at him?
is I want you to really pay attention to pitches, especially for those last three words.
Why are you laughing at him?
Laughing at him. So what's happening here is we're pretty much just using the same pitch over and over. And this is very difficult in American English because you guys are probably already aware when you're speaking American English quickly, it uses a lot of reductions, it uses a lot of linking. So how do native speakers understand you when you're talking? How do they know what you're saying? Well, the big tool that we're going to use is pitch, because higher pitches are going to be used for stressed sounds, stressed syllables. Lower pitches are going to be used for parts that are not stressed. And so part of the issue, I would say here,
Why are you laughing at him?
and Ruben paying attention to that ending. So got the first part great. Instead of Aaron, it's going to be Adam. But I could definitely see how you could interpret that as Aaron. I could hear that. So, but the big thing here is that for that last part, I think if we wanted this to get a little bit more of a natural rhythm,
Why are you laughing at him?
we need to decide what are we stressing. My guess is that you probably want to stress laughing. Typically in American English, you are not going to stress the pronoun. Typically what you're going to do is you are going to stress the verb. If you have a verb, then a pronoun, then a preposition followed by a pronoun. Usually your pronoun preposition will not receive stress. Instead, you'll get that stress on your verb, like laughing at him. Why are you laughing at him? Why are you laughing at him? So notice a higher pitch on laugh. And then after that, every single syllable is going to actually go down in pitch because nothing else is going to be stressed, like laughing at him. Why are you laughing at him? Why are you laughing at him? Okay. And that's going to help you get a little bit more of a natural rhythm there.
Laughing at him.
So say laughing at him or laughing at him. Why are you laughing at him? You can hear the difference in the rhythm there. Okay. Some other parts of linking that are happening in that first part.
Why are you laughing at him?
Really like that reduction and that linking for that first part. So like, why are you laugh? Why are you laugh? So that part there, I think, is a very natural linking there. Notice that nothing there is stressed. Okay. And other things are standing out for this first part.
Why are you laughing at him?
Okay. And the other thing I really like, just want to highlight for the him, notice that she's not really pronouncing that H. So it's not laughing at him, it's more laughing at him. So we actually are going to drop the H, going to slide right into the M sound at the end. And that way you can link things more. Very often when you have a pronoun that starts with an H, so like he or his, and oftentimes as well when you have even like a TH. So for instance, like them or their, a lot of times those THs are going to get dropped in terms of linking. All right. Those are the first things that kind of stand out to me. I want to thank you for sending that audio file. Be sure to leave a timestamp in a moment. Okay. I know there's been some questions in the chat. Everyone is super, super curious. Oh my gosh. People saying, so again, why are you laughing at him? Pablo asked a question. Who are you? Great. Pablo, my name is Jeff. I'm from the channel Fluent American. We are going to be joined by Jennifer in a moment. She's going to be joining us as we give pronunciation advice. This is a weekly show that we have where people can submit pronunciation files and we have some feedback for them. So that way we're able to give you guys some actual tips and suggestions that you can start applying to your own speech. If you are interested in getting your own pronunciation analyzed today, I do encourage you to try to do it soon, so that way we make sure we have time to do it. But again, you can see in the video description, or I'll put it in the chat once more. If you go to this link here and you watch the earlier part in the stream, we walk through the process of how to submit your own pronunciation files so Jennifer and I can listen and give you some suggestions. Joe's asking a similar question. Don't worry, she is coming. She is going on an Easter egg hunt. If you guys don't know, so again, for those of you celebrating Easter, happy early Easter. She'll be back as soon as she is done with the kids and things like that. And that also answers Elchin's question today. Everyone's question. Important questions, so we appreciate that. Also trying to make a note of our time. So that first file this right around the 10-minute mark. So again, Jennifer will be showing up shortly. And in the meantime, we'll continue taking a look at some files. Trying to start off with some shorter ones. A little hard. Everyone's sending these books, which is fine. Okay, take a listen to this pronunciation file here.
He is not the sharpest tool in the shed.
Not that. This is not comment about people's intelligence and things. Okay.
He is not the sharpest tool in the shed.
Okay. Thanks, Marcos, for sending this file. Good words, in case you were wondering. But one more time, then we'll give some thoughts.
He is not the sharpest tool in the shed.
Okay. One of the things that we're hearing, everything sounds really high in terms of the pitch and things like that. Okay. Ooh, good question. Can't see the link in the chat. Definitely take a look at the video description. See if you can see it there. Also, if you look on the community post on the channel, you'll see a link as well.
He is not the sharpest tool in the shed.
Okay. And Emmanuel makes the note that they see shepherds. So just some thoughts there. Ooh, very quick thing, guys.
Hi everyone, it's Jennifer Tarl from Tarl Speech. The beginning of each of these words is exactly the same. Slight. Hard enough thinking about what to do while you're translating and thinking about what to say, and you're trying to think about what kind of an L is this.
Hi.
Hey, how are you? Happy
I am
Saturday.
Happy Saturday. Happy early Easter.
Yeah, same to you.
Your people are very anxious. Oh my gosh. Everyone's like, where's Jennifer? Where's Jennifer? Where's Jennifer? I was like, oh my gosh.
Sorry, everyone. I was at an Easter egg hunt. We had important things to do this morning, so sorry I'm a few minutes late.
So the question then is, how many eggs did you find?
Hundreds. So
it
was a low turnout at the Easter egg hunt. So my daughter got 2 entire baskets full of eggs, lots of candy. She's sorting it as we speak. She has braces now, so there's certain things she can't eat. She's sorting those things out. Trust me, she's not hurting in the candy department. It has plenty.
Fortunately, candy can last a horrifyingly long time.
Exactly, right?
Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us. For those of you who do not know you from my channel, can you just give us a quick introduction about who you are?
Yeah, again, my name is Jennifer Tarl, and I am a speech language pathologist by training. And for almost 18 years, I have been making pronunciation videos. I've been sending those out in my newsletter before I was even on YouTube. Now I post everything on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, all those good things. I have some products, and yeah, I just love helping people be clear communicators. That's kind of my jam.
Got you. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. You are located in Pennsylvania on the west side.
I am. Yeah.
Now, being from Philadelphia, typically we don't have the best relationship east and western Pennsylvania, but today we will make a very kind exception.
We're going to bridge the divide.
We will be okay.
Exactly.
Are you a Steelers fan? I do have to ask.
Of course. I mean, I was born in southwestern Pennsylvania.
Gosh,
so you're sort of born into it. You love the sound effect. You have to be. So yes, of course, I'm a Steelers fan. I should have worn my black and yellow.
Oh yeah, but it is on. It is on.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Jennifer, I have a pronunciation file I was taking a look at, but we did have some questions. Some of them directly right to you, so I want to make sure we have time for them.
Sure. Yeah, I can't see them in the chat for some reason. Maybe only you can see them. I'm not quite sure.
Interesting. Can you see this one on screen?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I'll pull them up then. That's fine. Okay, so this one's saying, is to going to sound like the in the sentence, so to speak? So in so to speak, sound like the. What would you say for like so to speak versus so to speak?
I definitely hear that. I always say to my students, though, I tend to overpronounce because I'm trying to be clear and I'm
Right.
presenting. So I would say
Mhm.
so to speak, but casually I would say soda, so to speak,
Mhm.
like I'm
Yeah.
drinking a soda, so to speak.
Mhm.
hmm
Yeah. I would. I think that's also. I think I'm really glad you brought that up about context and like clarity. So, for instance, I think a lot of times, it all depends on kind of like your language goals. I feel like if you're someone
Right,
that's trying to prepare for like public speaking, like giving a speech or things like that, I think those
right.
are times when those T sounds are really going to pop. But otherwise, if your goal's more conversational, I think that fast D sound is that flap T is going to be way more frequent.
All right. And if I can jump in, I made a
Please.
mistake. I was in private chat. Now that I'm in comments, I can see
You can see everything now.
everything.
Okay,
I
cool,
can
cool,
see
cool.
everything. Yeah, it's a miracle. So I can see
It's scary.
everything. We're all good. Yeah,
The Matrix has been awakened. Okay.
exactly.
What else have we got? Other things too. American food.
Same.
I can't pronounce American English well. Okay. Well, hopefully we can help you with that today. We have another question as well from Lumberjack. Do these words sound the same? We have. Where are the words that are sounding the same? Moron, he called it okay, moron versus you can find. Oh, moron versus moron.
Yeah.
Good question. I wouldn't have put that together. Yeah, you're good.
They
Um,
sound the same.
mhm. I think a real key thing too, just a quick note. So there's a lot of syllables here. So like at least in terms of like the two syllables. So I would definitely say when you're doing like moron, just make sure that more has a slightly higher pitch than on in most situations. Like the on in general, you want to be a little bit lower, just because of stress. Other things here.
But with that, I'm going to jump in. I mean, depending
Mhm.
on, because I've been working with a lot of students on focus words. And
Mm.
so it depends on how you say more on, put more on the sandwich or put more on the sandwich. It
Yeah.
kind of would change that. So sometimes it might sound like moron and sometimes it might sound a little different. And I think that's a big thing I've been hearing a lot with my students lately. It's like, well, sometimes it sounds like this and sometimes it doesn't. And that's because pronunciation
Yeah.
is kind of dynamic
Yeah.
and
And
it's
the
not
answer
perfect.
is yes. Yeah.
Right.
Like people asking questions like, do I do this or do I do this? And the answer is yes. You kind of need to.
Yes.
It kinda depends. um, I see Mohammed, I'm guessing Mahad, saying, but make sure you're using your schwa sound, like your try not to get too tense in your mouth. Just a quick like
Mhm.
I think the big thing you probably see this with your students too. A lot of people doing like bot versus like but.
Mhm.
And ooh,
Yeah, those unstressed vowels are such a challenge for so many of my students, especially Spanish and Japanese speakers. That just making it short and relaxed and less than the others. That's a skill that a lot of people are working on, and
mhm,
it does make a difference. It does make you sound a
it does.
little more natural.
It does. Yeah. It's 100%. I think a lot of those languages that you mentioned are so syllable time, especially Japanese. Like
Yeah.
every single syllable is the same length, and American English just really doesn't like that for the rhythm.
No,
Um,
no, we like variation.
yeah. hmm let's do maybe two more quick questions, and then we can bump into some pronunciation files again.
Sure.
Lumberjack back at it. American English learners. Do these words sound the same when we speak fast? Atom, atom, atom.
Mhm. Yep.
Yes.
All of the above. Uh-huh.
That's usually
Now
why I
that
like
would
it.
get into though the at him. Sometimes I would say at him. Very
Mhm.
clearly, again, more public speaking as opposed to Adam, which I
Context.
would say conversationally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or even just if you need to like clarify the specific preps. It all depends on what word you're stressing.
Right.
But is it possible for all these to link together and sound the same? Yep.
Correct.
I mean, that's the
hmm
that's the best part of
True
English,
story.
and also the scariest is that anything is almost possible, which is very liberating, but can also be very frustrating if you're looking for one thing.
Exactly.
Yep. And last thing, a deviated septum. Interesting. This is definitely a speech pathology thing. Can a deviated septum lead to sounding nasally? Hmm.
I gotta be honest. I'd have to Google that one. I can't remember from grad school. It's been many, many years. But I think yes. I think ultimately, yes. I'm sure there's some nuance there, but yes, it could make you sound a little more nasal for sure.
What else? I
And
mean, you can experiment.
even with that, I would say like try to like speak from your chest. I do see on your channel you talk about that voice a lot, which I do
Mhm,
love because I
mhm.
think that's an often overlooked part of speaking clarity and trying to speak more like a native speaker. So we tend
Yeah.
to speak from here. A lot of
Yeah.
people tend to speak from up here and in here. So
Mhm.
that's a big difference too.
Yeah. No, 100%. Yeah, I mean, you can do quick exercises too to just kind of play around with the placement. So for instance, you probably see this a lot with your students. Like a lot of times I'll ask a student, how do you pronounce, like, for instance, the letter N? And a lot of people are doing a sound like really high, really forward, oftentimes towards the lips. And
Mhm.
that obviously can lead to a very clear sound. But what often happens, I mean, you have N sounds that come at the end of a word, and it's so easy for that higher placement, that nasally N sound, to then have an impact on your vowel. So suddenly you get a word like pain, and it becomes like
Mhm.
pain. And it's
Yes.
these little things that if you're doing this across an entire sentence, this is what gives that strong sense of an accent. Because you're allowing things to just go really high when you're talking.
Right. Mhm.
Okay. So many questions there, but I want to make sure we get to people's pronunciation. So if we don't get to everyone's question, my apologies. Also, I'm going to do my best because someone says, "Hello, Patricia. My name's Jeff. It's good to meet you." Um, I will try to talk a little bit slow. I'm always like, it's not a. It's something that I always kind of struggle with because I want to give authentic speech and authentic rhythms because I think a lot of channels out there are so dedicated to the super clear, again, kind of like public speaking and things like that, which is great. But a lot of times, again, conversational English isn't always about that level of clarity. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's always kind of that debate like, how natural do you go? How much do you modify when you're like teaching in terms of like the natural language and things like that? What's kind of your stance on that?
I do try to speak as naturally as possible. Of course,
Yeah.
in my videos, I do overpronounce. I go a little bit slower some of the time
Yeah.
because I just work with a variety of people, not just people learning pronunciation. And I try to be clear. One of the biggest things I do is I just try to pause longer. So
Mm.
by
Yeah.
pausing more and a little bit longer, that makes me sound like I'm speaking much slower, and I'm
Yeah.
not really speaking slower. It's just I tend to try to be a little more thoughtful about pausing.
Hmm.
And I think
Hmm.
a good tip kind of for everyone, just in general. Again, I was just at the drive-through this week, and it is almost impossible. And I'm a native speaker to understand what someone is saying at the drive-through because it's just going the whole way through. There's not a single pause. And so if that person on the other end would just pause, that would make things
Yeah.
so
100%.
much easier to
100%.
understand.
It's
Yeah,
interesting.
I
That's
don't
actually something.
fast talker.
Hmm.
I think that you just tend to not pause as much. That's all.
Hmm. Hmm.
I think you're
I'm glad you mentioned pauses too.
yeah.
Because that's something I see with students is I think a lot of times students are actually talking faster than some native speakers.
Yeah,
And
agreed.
like and pause is such a useful tool. And I think
Mhm.
just I used to be an examiner for IELTS for a speaking test, and you can actually get punished if you talk too fast. You
Yeah.
hit, here's your band six. Take your six. Because you're just talking too quickly. That is definitely something that can occur. Um, all right, I'm gonna share my screen again. We're going to listen to some files. There was one that
Mhm.
we were on a minute before you arrived. Take a
So
look
while you're
at.
pulling that up, I see like an actually interesting question here that I am always like fighting with my students about. Not fighting, but you know what I mean,
Yeah,
having
yeah.
discussions.
Uh-huh.
What sequence do you recommend? Individual sounds, words, sentences, or depends on the subject? I actually think with anything that you're learning, you need to start small and think big. Speech is definitely a motor activity. And so a lot of times your brain knows what it wants to do, but your mouth just can't keep up. And so starting with just practicing sounds to make sure you can say the sound before you say it in a word is helpful. It's not like you're going to do that forever. That's usually a super quick phase, but everyone sort of starts there. And then you do say the sound in words. And there's a lot of people that can say every sound at the beginning of the word, but then they can't say the sounds at the end of words. So then that's another strategy too, just like do what you can. And then you add on and then move up to sentences and reading. And I also think it's huge to, if you are reading something, to then take that next step and use that same language and same words that you just practiced while you're responding, while you're summarizing, so that you can practice the words a little more conversationally, because that's always the hardest part.
100%. Like I tell students a lot, like if you're practicing shadowing, for instance, you don't have to shadow the same way every time you shadow. Like for instance, maybe one time you shadow, hey, today I'm going to focus on pitches. Next time you shadow, hey, I'm going to focus on linking just words together. Next time you shadow, hey, I'm going to focus on vowel sounds or consonant sounds. There's not really a wrong thing here. One day you can focus on individual stuff. One day you can focus on sequences. The one thing I would say is that I think it's really helpful to don't just like learn a word at a time. Words don't appear by themselves. They appear with other words. Collocations are a real thing. So like if you're learning, for instance, a verb, you're practicing saying a verb, maybe try to find like 2 or 3 nouns that go with that verb and then practice that phrase a lot. So that way you're learning things that work in combination, because when you talk, you're not just talking one word at a time, you're grouping things.
Right. Exactly. And pick words that you use often, that you use at work, because it's that dosage idea, which you're going to practice those more because you use them all the time. So be intentional about your practice.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Thanks for the question there. Let's take a listen to this file here. Let me share my audio.
He is not the sharpest tool in the shed.
Okay, he's not the sharpest tool in the shed. We got our idiom.
He is not the sharpest tool in the shed.
Okay. Initial things are kind of standing out to you, Jennifer.
Can I hear it one more time?
Of course.
He is not the sharpest tool in the shed.
Thoughts on that?
His not the sharpest tool in the shed. So of course the L jumps out to me, because L always does, because that's one of the things I work on probably the most with people. But that that sort of like breathy start to it, and it sounded more like his to me instead of he's.
Interesting. Let me hear that.
He is not the sharpest tool in the shed.
Yeah. Another thing to qualify too is that we are working with internet files through headphones. Like there's a lot of factors at play with like computer or cell phone microphones, But I can see what you're talking about.
He is not the sharpest tool in the shed.
So you think like maybe having like a sharper E sound after he may have
I would say a longer E sound. Yeah. And then the sharpest sticks out to me too, because I'm hearing a little bit of a break there. Sharpest, like instead of sharpest.
Play again.
He is not the sharpest tool in the shed.
Sharpest. Kind of linking everything together would be helpful.
Let's see this again.
He is not the sharpest tool in the shed.
I think it all depends on kind of your goals and the rhythm. One of the things here that I'm noticing, to me, is it's not like a super long sentence, right? So I'm hearing about 3 main stresses.
He is not the sharpest tool in the shed.
He is not the sharpest tool in the shed. Those are kind of the 3 main stresses that I hear. And one of the things that I don't think that's wrong. I think you can do that with 3 thought groups. But one of the things that, and I'd love to know if you feel like your students are doing this too. One of the things I see a lot with students is I see students using a lot of thought groups in their sentences, which is resulting in slightly choppier speech because, every time you're throwing a thought group in there, you're adding an extra stress. And every time you're adding another stress, you are kind of affecting your pitch a lot because, you need to raise your pitch on those stress things. So what this can end up doing a lot of times is it can actually kind of, if you're not using enough pitches, it can almost lend that sense of sounding a little bit flat and robotic in your speech. I don't think this sounds robotic. There is some movement here.
He is not the sharpest tool in the shed.
But I do think we have some opportunities to expand the range of pitches that we're using. Because to me, it's like, he is not the sharpest tool in the shed. He is not the sharpest tool in the shed versus he's not the sharpest tool in the shed. He's not the sharpest tool in the shed, like something like that. Like, I think we have some opportunities to expand, especially some of our lower pitches, just to add some greater contrast.
And I think there's no pitch fall at the end.
It's
so I hear that a lot, is that if I were to stress shed, he's not the sharpest tool in the shed, I'd still have my pitch really fall at the end. I actually think, I mean, I always go back to, this is 100% clear, right? Like, that's like a number one, but if we're trying to make it better, definitely I would fall more at the end there. And the little tiny breaks kind of, I think, make it sound a little more choppy with the he
100%.
is sharpest. Like, I think there's these little teeny tiny breaks there that if they weren't there, it would sound a lot smoother.
He is not the sharpest tool in the shed.
I would agree with that. I also like that example of the falling intonation that you had when you were doing an example on shed, because I think a lot of people, when they're going in American English, the intonation that they're using is so straight. Like, it's like this or this. And there's not that much nuance in terms of the waver. You know, it's not shed. It's like shed, shed. You know, like having just a little bit of movement, just a little bit. I'm exaggerating it. But again, it's not like shed. It's more shed, shed. Like, just a little bit of intonation movement there can really add a lot more nuance to what you're saying. You know. Other things for this one?
He is not the sharpest tool in the shed.
Not sharpest tool in the shed.
Someone else is saying in the chat that I think sharpest should be stressed. You could stress sharpest. I mean, I think that's what's like kind of cool about focus words, is that you really develop what you think is and what you want your listener to understand. I always say that pitch is like punctuation, and or a highlighter. And if you want to highlight that word, like if you were trying to sell something, for instance, you know, the sharpest knife, I would stress sharpest. You know, but if you're talking about a lot of people, he's not the sharpest tool in the shed. I mean, so there's nuance there. You can kind of pick what you want. And I think that's what's great about it, is that there's really I guess there is an incorrect every once in a while, but it's hard to be incorrect as long as you are having a focus word. And getting back to what you were saying before, I do think sometimes people choose too many focus words. You can choose too many, but I always say you need to have at least one, maybe two in a sentence. Kind of start with that. And I think that helps a lot too.
Yeah. I think that's really helpful, especially like for shadowing exercises. Like, if you're trying to shadow and sound as natural as possible, it can be really helpful to analyze the thing you're shadowing first. Try to identify, what is the word I'm stressing? And then kind of work backwards, because, okay, I'm stressing this, so that means the pitch needs to be doing this. That means the pitches around it are probably going to be reduced. There's probably going to be, again, in general, American English, you are going down in pitch until you reach your stress, and then you kind of go down again. And it's that constant movement.
And find someone that you like the way that they communicate, and then 100%. Shadow them. I know I work with a lot of men, and I always say, and I just tend to have big pitch changes naturally. I'm totally making them smaller right now. But if I'm talking and I'm very animated, like at the Easter egg hunt, I was like a crazy lady. My pitch was going up and down. So it was exciting. We had a lot of eggs. So, you know, I just think that if you find someone that you really like their pronunciation, watch videos of them speaking and, you know, kind of develop that person's rhythm, because mine might be not working for you. And that's fine, because I'm a different person. I'm a woman, I'm a teacher. So things are a little bit different depending on who you are and your job, or just your personality. Like, my brother and my dad speak very slowly. I tend to speak a little faster and a little bit more, with a little more range in my
Yeah.
pitch, whereas they're a little bit more like this. So, you know, I think that's interesting too, is it depends on what you want to portray as well.
100%. 100%. I think that's really, so many good things there in terms of things to be paying attention to. Again, like I think going back to stress a little bit too is just experiment with how many stresses you're putting in your sentences. Put in more, put in less. In terms of finding a role model for shadowing, yeah, a lot of times I think too we're almost afraid, I think, to use as many pitches. American English needs a lot of pitches. Most likely your first language does not. A lot of people think Americans are super exaggerated, but we need the pitch differences to add contrast. So otherwise people are not going to understand you. So like put on the mask.
Contrast is king. Yeah. Contrast is, that's it. That's the way to go. That's a great way to say it. Contrast is most important, I think.
Yeah. So like put on like if you're not comfortable using pitches, you need to really get comfortable with exaggerating. So like put on a mask. It's not you speaking American English. Give yourself a name. I'm Mary speaking English, or I'm Joseph speaking English. Like give yourself an American English persona. And then it's crazy, but psychologically it has an impact. It allows you to become a lot more experimental.
Yeah.
I'm going to play this file one more time, see if there's other things here that stand out.
He's not the sharpest tool in the shed.
Oh, just also something I wanted to touch on for sharpest. I think if you stress sharpest, one way you might hear that said, like, he's not the sharpest tool in the shed, which again is kind of like it's not the nicest thing to say, especially like if you do it like that way. So like if you want to stress sharpest, that's one way you might hear someone doing it. Like he's not the sharpest tool in the shed. Notice that when you do it like that, again, it's not quite sarcastic, but again, it's not very friendly. Like it sounds like you're trying to be polite, but you're not really trying to be polite. So you're making it stand out and dragging out the word and raising the pitch really high, and yeah.
And I think if you're thinking about also the contrasts that we were just talking about, I think we're talking about big sentence level stress and pitch, right? But if you take a little deeper dive into that sharpest, there's really not a whole lot of contrast between the syllables in that word. And so if you had a little more contrast between sharpest, then you're going to have that longer, higher difference in that syllable. So, you know, if you're starting with pitch as well, I think the working on word level syllable stress is super helpful, because then you can kind of get used to those pitch changes and those contrasts. And then that helps. And don't forget, make one syllable shorter. So even if we make one longer and stress it, the other one needs to be shorter. Shorter. Schwa mill. So we're into that schwa. You got to go short with one of those.
I'm so glad you met. I literally just made a video because I think a lot of people are missing this part of words, is that every syllable, you know, you have your stressed syllable. That means every other syllable is in general. If it's not stressed, you want to go a little faster on it. You want to go in general a little lower in pitch and things like that. And this is true for especially multi-syllable words. Like for instance, an example like independent. Notice how much longer and higher pen is to the other syllables. Independent. So like this is how contrast isn't word to word. It's literally syllable to syllable, even inside of words. Every single syllable should have a slightly different pitch in general. Yeah. And that's how you make words really separate. Oh my gosh, I want to talk about this file all day. I'm going to move us on because this is...
I know, I could keep going on that one for sure. But keep going. Move on.
It's a 3-second file. I also know... I'm sorry, guys. We're going to get through as many files as we can, but I also want to make sure Jennifer has enough time to kind of talk about what she does for people in my audience. I know a lot of you already are familiar with Jennifer, but Jennifer, can you talk to us a little bit about things like your site, what you got going on? What are some of the things that people can turn to you for?
Yeah, this is so sweet of you to put this up. I appreciate that. Yeah. So I help people become just effective communicators. That's the way I like to think of it. And so I kind of have a 3-pronged approach because I know not everyone can afford classes. So I have free YouTube classes. I have some courses on, I I think you call it Udemy. I don't even know how you say
I think
it.
it's you. That's a good. Now I'm
It's
wondering.
you? Okay. I don't even know. There's some classes there. They're not very expensive. And then I do offer both ESL pronunciation courses, but also pronunciation for just Americans who have been born and raised here, who speak English, that maybe need some help with their pronunciation and public speaking. I work with a lot of women in business on how to change their voice and pronunciation, because a lot of times people try to change things to kind of fit in certain situations, and it makes you then sound inauthentic. So I help people kind of achieve their communication goals through voice, through pronunciation. And then I also just, I've had books forever. You guys, I've been doing this for so long. I used to have DVDs.
Oh, wow.
And audio files. Oh, yeah. I had it all.
You had floppy disks?
And I still have some if you want one. So I now have all of my books. They're all digital. And as things evolve, I'm able to now offer my books with all of the audio embedded. So you can shadow right along and practice. And I have them as easy as just in little individual one sound packages, because if that's all you want, that's all you need. And I try to keep the prices super cheap. I have a lot of freebies. So if you go to my website, and I'll put the link in the chat, I'll find it.
Please do.
But I do have some freebies as well.
Great. Also, be sure to, if you want to post links to the Udemy stuff, feel free to do that as well.
I will.
We can find you. Cool. So quick questions. Oh God, people are asking the heavy questions. Let's start here. Ruben asking, it is not, or he is not. Is that for the original sentence? He's not the sharpest tool. Oh, I know why. I see why they said that. Okay. They're not. I think this is in reference, if I'm understanding right, it's in reference to this. So it is not the sharpest tool. Now, it's a phrase. This is not literally a tool. You're basically describing a person as not being intelligent, but you don't want to say he's dumb. You want to say, that guy, he's not the sharpest tool in the shed. That's just a way of saying someone's not very intelligent. It's not very nice, but it's possible. Another question I see here from Pablo. Is it possible to speak English like an American? Oh my gosh.
Oh, that's such a heavy question.
Pablo, how are we supposed to answer this?
Do it. I always come back to, you could spend a whole lifetime trying to do that. And some people do, but I think it's all about just using it and being clear. And, if you get there and there are some people who can, I've worked with some people, they take one class and it seems to just click and then they do it. But I do think it's a journey. And I think as with anything, you're always learning. So there's always going to be something that's not going to be exactly native.
Yeah.
What do you think? Yeah. That's my 2 cents.
I think even the concept of I think this all goes back to even just the concept of a native speaker, which is a very, in my opinion, kind of a problematic.
Yes.
Because the way you talk in your first language is different than how your neighbor talks in your first language. Everyone speaks exactly a unique language. So we're people, we like to group things. I totally get it. By the way, you can check out the link here. Thank you.
Yeah. And then, like you said, your neighbor talks differently. We spoke a little bit differently. I lived in California. We spoke differently there. When you live in Chicago, you speak a little differently. When you live in Pittsburgh, you speak a little differently. There's just variations abounding. And then it depends on what group of people you grew up with. If you grew up with people who English wasn't their native language, there are going to be some words that you say that are a little bit different. So that's what makes it interesting.
Yeah. I think what I would say is that if your goal is to have as natural as possible a sound in American English, the whole thing about my channel. So in general, I know a lot of people focus on mouth position and things like that. My own personal stance is, hey, I think in my opinion, if I only had time to study 4 things to sound natural in American English, I would study placement. It's like, where are you projecting sound from? So for instance, if you're doing like an E sound, a lot of languages are doing like E, really high, almost nasally or top of throat, back of mouth. Whereas in general, in American English, you get more of an E sound. So firstly, I would say, hey, if you get the placement right. Second thing is if you get the amount of breath correct, because American English is just letting so much air through. If you want to know one biggest differences between British English and American English, it's breath. British English super closed off, really tight in the throat. American English is trying to engage that diaphragm, trying to get a lot of air through. And by doing that, you also kind of lower the placement as well. So there's 2 things there. The third thing I would study in pitch, because I'll be honest, most of the files we're going to listen to today, there's probably going to be some pitch things that aren't the most natural sounding. It's just the way it is. So trying to increase your range of pitches. And then the fourth thing, American English loves vowel sounds, doesn't really like consonant sounds. So if you can get your vowel sound right in your words, it's going to make everything sound more natural. So that's kind of my, if your goal is an American accent, I would personally focus on those 4 things. Anything you want to take on there or add, Jennifer?
I agree with those. I do think there's a person out there. I do work on placement, but it's not super specific. If you watch my videos, I talk a lot about, very similar to what you're saying, like, what does your mouth do? You can't really think about what your tongue is doing a lot of the times. But I do think that comes into play. Like, I work with a lot of Japanese speakers, and ZH and J. J is just really hard for my Japanese speakers. So learning that placement is key, because you need to know, you got to touch your teeth to start that J sound. But again, 100%. If you are going for really sounding native, not just going for clear, I do think it's about that voice, the projection, the thought grouping, and the contrasts. I think contrasts are where it's at. It's what it's all about, is making sure that you have those differences.
Yeah. I'm going to jump us to another file. Give me a moment. Let's see what we have here. Okay, let's take a listen to this one.
So recently I've been getting into the habit of eating healthier. For example, I'm cutting down on different types of fats like whole milk or butter. And I also try to exercise around 3 times a week. I already feel better, and I guess if I stick with the plan, I will see even more benefits in the future.
Okay, a long file here. Let me. Oh, good, I did it again. I have to find it. Which one? I think it was this one. Okay, let me play it one more time.
So recently I've been getting into the habit of eating healthier.
Let's just kind of start with that first sentence. I'll play that one more time, Jennifer.
So recently I've been getting into the habit of eating healthier.
Okay, anything that's kind of jumping out at you?
Yeah, it took me a minute to kind of shift into listening, because everything is very similar. I would almost call it more monotone. As the file kind of gets going, I kind of picked up on that, and then I could listen differently. Very breathy, very few pitch changes is what I'm noticing most of all, and more word for word.
Got you.
Instead of sort of linking things together.
So recently I've been getting into the habit of eating healthier.
I see everything you're talking about. I see there. I wouldn't say it sounds flat. So, because you can hear, so he's got like what, 3 parts in this first part.
So recently we have
a first part.
Getting into the habit of.
Been getting into the habit, and then we have our last part.
Eating healthier.
Of eating healthier. I do think we increase the range more, but I do hear kind of like 3 distinct parts, which is great, because in general what I tell students is that, you know, when you switch thought groups, I'm hearing 3 thought groups there, you do want to just kind of switch the pitch register just a little bit, and that's going to help add some contrast. And so I get that.
So recently I've been getting into the habit of.
I've been getting into the habit. I do think I personally probably would have shifted that even lower. So recently I've been getting into the habit. I think by raising that habit.
Recently, I've been getting into the habit of
versus habit of. I do think habit was an opportunity to go just a little bit lower to increase our range of like lower pitches.
eating healthier.
Vowel wise, I think that L sound in healthier to me doesn't sound the most natural.
The habit of eating healthier.
Healthier. I feel like that placement's kind of jumping up on that L. Healthier versus like healthier. I don't know if you're hearing that as well.
The habit of eating healthier.
Eating healthier versus eating healthier. Because I personally probably would have dropped that a little bit more. Eating healthier.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Let me play that again, see if there's other things that jump out to you in that first part.
So recently, I've been getting into the habit of eating healthier.
I think that this also sounds... It sounds to me almost like... This doesn't feel conversational to me. It feels like I'm talking to a microphone and I know I'm talking into a microphone. Like I know I'm making a recording, so this is like my recording voice. Like it doesn't sound to me like two people talking to each other. I don't know if you get that sense as well.
Right. It sounds like he's reading, which is what I thought he was doing. So maybe I'm coming at it differently.
Yeah, 100%. So I'm like, so how do we... So then my question for you is, if you want this to sound conversational and you're just trying to adjust this first line, what are your thoughts?
So recently, I've been getting into the habit of eating healthier.
I would say so. Recently,
okay.
I've been getting into the habit. I would have bigger contrasts. That's what I do. So I'm speaking about what I do.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to really stretch words, and I really have bigger pitch and loudness differences. And also, I'm not as breathy. I got to be honest. The breathiness sometimes, just as a listener, breathiness throws me off. It's almost like I'm trying to like lean in to listen. And it's not that you're not being loud enough. It just sounds a little bit less precise to me.
I like what you did with the so recently part. One of the two biggest things you did to add contrast, held the word longer, pauses, lengthen your word.
So recently I've been
lengthening,
getting into the habit of.
Yeah. Like I think right now almost every single word is pronounced almost for the same speed.
So recently I've been getting into the habit of eating healthier.
Everything's at the same pace. Every single thing at the same pace. And I know we've talked a lot about contrast and we've talked a lot about pitch as a tool for contrast, but contrast doesn't just mean pitch. There's so many ways to add contrast. Pitch, but also speed. So versus so. Volume. So recently, these are all the techniques. You have so many tools with your voice, so we can incorporate some more to increase the range of contrast we're using here. Other things before we move on to our next part?
I just want to reiterate, I agree with you. Pitch isn't the only thing. And even American speakers don't always really have huge pitch differences, but they will stress in some way, shape, or form. And I think it's always important to remember the big three: loudness, pitch, and length. And I think a lot of times that length and the pitch are overlooked. I just had a really great comment on one of my videos. I have to go back and find it, where someone said he finally understood what we meant by syllable stress because he had to shout at someone across the street. And so by shouting, he got that, I said this part of the sentence and word louder. So that's what you mean by saying stress something. So whatever it is you do naturally, louder or longer or higher, try to kind of focus on that a little bit more. So it's all about the difference. And don't forget about the pauses. I'm big into pauses. Like you said, so recently, that's how I would sort of say more conversational. I'd add longer pauses and kind of slow that whole sentence down.
And that's actually a very easy thing to measure for pauses is if you're shadowing. Again, I always recommend shadowing. Look how long the section is that you're shadowing. Maybe you're shadowing something that's 3 seconds long. Well, when you're shadowing, are you taking 3 seconds or are you doing 2.5 seconds? Are you doing 4 seconds? Where are you losing time? Where are you buying time?
Right.
So that's a very easy way to kind of check yourself. I'm going to move to the next part of this sentence.
For example, I'm cutting down on different types of fats like whole milk or butter.
Let me play that again.
Eating healthier. For example, I'm cutting down on different types of fats like whole milk or butter.
I want to talk really quick about lists, and I'd love your thoughts on lists because I think.
Oh, let's talk about it because I have strong feelings too.
Let's go. I think it's just one of those topics that's very easy to oversimplify because a lot of people are taught that, okay, when you have a list, rising intonation, falling intonation. That's your very stereotypical pattern for lists, which is true. That can work. It misses out on one of the like superpowers of lists. When you're saying a list, instead of using, for instance, like a falling intonation on your last item, how about we use like a rising intonation? Like, to give an example here. So he's giving a list of things he's trying to cut out.
For example, I'm cutting down on different types of fats like whole milk or butter.
Whole milk or butter. One of the reasons that I think this sounds, again, it sounds like it's red. Doesn't sound necessarily conversational. And I think a lot of times if you listen to people speaking conversationally, what you're actually going to find is that this list probably, in my opinion, probably would use rising intonation, because just listen to the difference between these, like whole milk or butter. Like whole milk or butter. Do you hear the difference there? By having that rising intonation on butter, it gives your listener the impression that the list is ongoing. There's 1,000 other things I could say. Whole milk, butter, oil, whatever, So by actually ending a list on a rising intonation, especially in spoken conversation, it can give your listener the impression that this is not exhaustive. There are more things I could say, and you get that. But I'm not going to name everything because I don't have time to do that. Whereas if you use that falling intonation, it kills all your energy. All your momentum's gone. I'm cutting down different types of fats, like whole milk or butter. Done. And then that's just it. What are your thoughts on lists? Tell me more about lists.
I think lists, again, like you said, they're overlooked, and I try to give people tips to make your life easier, right? Because there's so many things to think about. So I think in general, come up with what works for you for a list, right? Again, I know I sound like a broken record. I think it's about really pausing. And then also, I think it's so easy to practice linking and sort of a focus word or highlighting something in your list. So again, you pick what works for you. If you want it to be louder, if you want it to be longer, or you want it to be higher, it just needs to be different. So I would say, for example, types of fat, whole milk, or butter. So I added pauses and I just picked one word. I tried not to do too much with pitch. I know I automatically add a little more pitch, but I made those words a little bit longer purposefully. So it's really just about making it different. So think of how you could make that different.
I like how you did that, like whole milk or butter. So there were even just, again, like a lot of times when you have lists, each unit in your list is almost like its own little thought group in a lot of cases. So no, it's like whole milk, butter. Like, you're not saying whole milk, butter, because now it's the same pitch for everything. But when you switch items in your list, switching up that pitch, even just slightly, whole milk, butter. So notice that whole milk is like up here. Then I'm going to drop a little bit, butter, whole milk, butter. Or you can do the opposite too, like whole milk, butter. Like, it kind of depends on context.
I always say, think about if you're giving someone a list and there could be a different amount. How would you help people understand that you're saying, I want you to go to the store and buy a stick of butter, not a pound of butter. So what I did there is stick. I made it longer. I actually went lower a little bit. I want a stick of butter, not a pound of butter. So again, contrast.
Yep. And that also brings up contrast. Speaking of contrastive stress and things like that too.
And the names aren't important. I always want to say that to people. Yes, it's important to know the vocabulary when you're learning something,
Yes.
but come up with like a mental way to do it. All the fancy words don't matter, right? We
Yeah.
use these because we're teaching you, right? But like if you call it something else, I don't care what you call it, just figure out how it works for you and then kind of
Yeah.
do that. I think sometimes people get so focused on like, is this a dark L? Is this a light L? Is this contrast? Yes, is it this? It's like, I don't know. It sounded good, right? Like just go for it.
100%. Yeah, just do the thing. Don't.
Yeah, do the thing.
It doesn't need a name.
As the kids say, let's do this thing. Yeah.
I want to try to get through as many files as we can. So if we don't listen to everyone's full files, my apologies.
How many do we have?
So much to talk about. Let's just kind of see what happens.
Okay, go. Keep going.
We'll keep it organic. I'm also want to make sure we get to people's questions because people are asking some great questions as well. YouTube user asking, do you know ESL learners who actually mastered American accent and sound? This is similar to, I believe it was Pablo's question earlier. I know people who I think if you took select audio from them and you asked a native speaker to identify who sounds native, who doesn't sound native, I think there are people who could trick people in situations. I'll put it that way.
Yeah. And I also think it's easier like to do it situationally. I worked with a woman who made incredible progress. But when we were just having a conversation, she would totally slip back into her more, I would say her baseline pronunciation, right? Like there's nothing wrong with it. It was just her normal. But then when she was really focused on it, like especially for a presentation, you couldn't tell. But again, very situational.
Yeah.
It's hard to maintain.
It's kind of like a Turing test, like for robots, or like AI. It's like the better you get, the more those little, I don't want to say inaccuracies, but those little unusual things that happen in speech stand out. It's tough because it just takes one thing to kind of throw things off. Lumberjack. Man, Lumberjack is just all over the chat today.
Hey, Lumberjack. I love that name. I love that screen name.
We say, do come to my party. Do write it down. But can we say, do it? Yeah. Like, I mean, it's highly contextual. Like,
I wouldn't even say do come to my party, to be honest. That sounds a little clunky to me. I would say come to my party or please come to my party. I personally wouldn't say do come to my party. But I would say do write it down.
I think again, highly contextual. Like it's I'll put it this way. In my life, I don't think I've ever had to say this. But is it possible to say this? Yeah, sure. I mean, anything's possible.
There you go. I like that answer. Is this correct? Technically, yes. I don't think I've ever said it. But yes, you definitely say that.
But you can? Yeah. I don't know if you saw, like, are you on Reddit at all or not so much? No. Okay. There was a big thing for like, dude, it was a whole thing in like Philadelphia. There was a big thing going on Reddit with like, do attend. Other quick questions before we look at our next file.
Let me see here.
I think I answered Lumberjack's question. Sorry if I didn't.
Oh, there's a good question from Lumberjack has another good one about of.
Okay, I think that's below. Yeah, let me get to this one first. Hello guys, currently I'm learning the language, but I'm a little lost because I don't know which skill should be given priority. Listener speaking. Do you want to get better at reading and writing, or do you want to get better at listening and speaking? What's your focus? What do you need language? What do you need English for? If your goal is to just be more conversational, reading and writing are going to help you, but listening and speaking are going to help you faster. One of the things that you also see, I mean, I can tell you firsthand, I was an Italian major in school, and what I found was that as my speaking got better, my reading also got better, even though I didn't spend as much time focusing on reading. So skills do translate.
Yeah, I think that I think we've gotten better in the US with teaching languages in school. I've had so many years of Spanish. I feel very uncomfortable speaking it. I feel fairly comfortable reading it. I mean, there's still a lot of vocabulary that I don't know.
No.
but language is so dynamic. And if you look at the way that we just learn naturally, it's listening, speaking, reading, and then writing. And so I think oftentimes listening is really not focused on. It's that, it's easier to read because it's at your own pace. So I personally think that listening and speaking piece are huge because we mostly use language to interact with other people. If you do need to be, but then again, I've also worked with people that they're scientists and they just really need to know how to read English really, really well. So then work on that. Like it depends on your goals, but I do think don't overlook that listening and speaking piece. That's key.
Yeah, 100%. There's so many questions I want to like talk about, but we have so many. We need to do like a panel or something like this. Lumberjack back again. When is the F and of silent? I got a lot of money. I see a lot of people at your party yesterday. It's so kind of you.
It depends on the person. It really does. Like I usually say the V, but I hear many people just say, I got a lot of money.
Yeah. I'm a person, I love reductions. I use reductions all the time. Maybe that's just from growing up in Philly, but just like, if I can reduce it, I reduce it personally.
It's funny, I've overcorrected. So I grew up in Western Pennsylvania and we had a lot of reductions. So I tend to over pronounce and try not to use as many.
No. They're so fun. Other things.
Those are great to learn for listening though. Reductions. I do teach those a little bit. I should do a lesson on those.
There's so many. And again, it's one of those things. There's a million ways to say things, which is very liberating, but also can be very frustrating. Okay, we're going to jump to another file. Thanks for everyone's patience today. We're trying to get through as many as we can, but there's so many interesting topics. Was this Sycamore still? Was this a new one?
Again.
This was not. Okay, this is a new one. Okay, let's take a look.
Again. I felt lonely.
Oh, snap.
I tried to figure out what happened to me last night. Now I'm thinking about riding an Arabian horse, dark brown, along the beach. Oh my goodness. What a lovely dream.
Okay, that was all right. The very first thing that stands out is the pitches.
Yeah, actually, here's what I think is interesting is that this person was going for some contrasts, but I think it was difficult to hear because the pitch was very high throughout. And even though there were pitch changes, because the pitch was so high, that pitch range could be so much smaller. And then I also think that everything was sort of from the head and it sounded a little harsh voice-wise.
Yeah, I think we have some opportunities for some lower pitches. Yeah.
Again, I felt lonely.
Yep. So like, I could have used some more pitches throughout this with kind of that pitch range of again or even slightly lower because we did start down.
Again, I felt lonely.
One thing is just a very minor thing. Lonely. I like the final E sound because I know that's something that tends to be tricky for a lot of students. I'm sure you've seen this. People reducing those final E's and like lonely versus like lonely. Still feel like I'm getting that E sound, which is great.
I felt lonely. I tried to figure out what happened to me last night.
Things are standing out to you there.
I'm actually kind of thinking of a lot of things I love. There's some good length differences. I'm hearing like a lot of nice little length differences. I like some pauses there. But again, that I come back to what do we need to fix? It's definitely the pitch range. My tip is always, if you do tend to have that higher pitch, try to start a little bit lower. Just starting a little bit lower helps a lot because then you can expand your range there. What are you hearing?
Yeah, again, I would definitely be open to some lower pitches. I want to hear. I'm going to play from I Tried down to the beach park. So I want to hear what happens.
I felt lonely. I tried to figure out what happened to me last night. Now I'm thinking about riding an Arabian horse.
I think I wanted that now I'm thinking about part to either go lower or that tried to figure out like I felt lonely. I tried to figure out what happened to me last night. Now I'm thinking about like I wanted some more kind of play with the I tried. It's like a contrast between the past versus the present. Like I tried doing this in the past and now I'm doing that. Like I wanted the pitches to kind of reinforce that shift in time and I didn't quite feel I was getting it. But just for that one section with tried to figure out.
I tried to figure out what happened to me last night.
The to me part sounded a little choppy.
Figured out what happened to me last
like I think it's like happened to me like that. I think that D is a little heavy.
Night. I tried to figure out what happened to me last night.
No, because everything else is relatively kind of fluid. So the times where it's not as fluid to me, it kind of stands out even more, which kind of throws me off.
Yeah, I also think you can add some more contrast just at the syllable level, again, to make it a little bit different. I know a lot of my students struggle with that sort of sentence level, but if you kind of break it down, like thinking, I know that in English we tend to do that. I'm thinking about it, right? But this one almost sounded like think in, like it wasn't sort of different enough. So I would kind of stress thinking. And even if you said thinking, one longer, one shorter, make sure you have a reduction in there. Because even though there are some length contrasts, everything tends to be pretty long here in terms of syllables. So kind of shrink some of those syllables. And that would, I think, also give us more contrast as well.
I want to hear that thinking part again.
Happened to me last night. Now I'm thinking about.
It does kind of have that choppy.
And about.
Back it up slightly more.
Now I'm thinking about riding an Arabian horse.
So everything was Arabian horse. Arabian horse. Like you can make something shorter and some longer. Everything's just kind of all the same length, even though you've got some nice longer vowels in there.
Riding an Arabian horse.
Yeah, so some more opportunities to kind of drag things down. I think that's fair. I'm going to play a little bit more of this, and then we'll try to move on to our next file.
Riding an Arabian horse. Dark brown along the beach.
So that kind of threw me off, like dark brown. And my expectation was things are going to drop. But instead, we go even higher. Like dark brown along, like it's like, oh okay.
Dark brown along the beach.
Like, I personally was expecting that to drop. That threw me off. It's like dark brown along the beach. I can play that part one more time.
But riding an Arabian horse. Dark brown along the beach.
One thing I do like the movement on beach. Again, like like that again. So it's not just like beach. It's like like just a little bit of movement makes it a little bit more dynamic. So I do appreciate that. I like that part. Yeah, I mean, I think overall my biggest comment for this file would be, can we just incorporate some lower pitches, please?
I hear this a lot, especially with women that I work with from certain areas of the world. Very high pitch compared to, I would say, American women. I think that you said it 100%. Before, we tend to speak more from the diaphragm. And so we tend to skew a little bit lower in our pitch, even though we have a bigger pitch. But that also lends to us having a bigger pitch range because we can start lower and go higher.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think sometimes sometimes I see the same thing with my female students. We're constantly trying to just go a little bit lower. I think some people are a little bit uncomfortable because they're like, I don't want to sound like a man. It's not going to happen. This is in
No,
general.
I have a lower. I think I don't know. I'm speaking for you. I mean, most people that I meet in general will just say that I have a lower pitch. I don't
I see
think
like
that my
Lady
pitch
Gaga ask a little bit. Yeah, I can see that.
tends to be that low, but you know, I have worked on sort of preserving my voice because I speak all day, and so I really do tend to speak more from my diaphragm and my chest.
Yeah.
Which gives me that a little bit lower pitch, because if I start to speak up here, I'll be strained by the end of the day.
Yeah.
And I think that's what happens to a lot of women is they tend to start speaking here, this gets strained, and then by the end of the day, you're kind of sounding like this, and we don't want that. But anyway.
100%. Yeah, no, in general, if you take like an American woman and someone who's speaking in another language, in general, speaking in American English, she's going to have a lower pitch in general than speaking in other languages. I'll move on to another file. Thanks to Shok for sending this. We appreciate it. While I'm loading up a file, quick question again.
There's some people
question. Yeah. Okay.
Go ahead.
A flu or the flu? The flu. The flu. I've never heard of, unless it's like a type of flu, but it's just going to be the flu. Yeah.
I would hear a flu epidemic. So maybe that's what you're talking about?
I feel like you put a noun after it.
Right.
Yeah, certainly possible. Yeah. All right, let's see another file. Oh my gosh, these are all super long files. Everyone's sending books. Okay, let's check out this one.
I've just returned from another city. The city's not very far from mine, only like 30 kilometers far.
Okay, we'll say this again.
I've just returned from another city. The city's not very far from mine, only like 30 kilometers far from here.
I believe this is from Elchin. Elchin also asked you, Jennifer, if you could guess where his accent is from.
Play it one more time, because I was only focusing on
Yeah, I totally understand.
Yeah.
I've just returned from another city. The city's not very far from mine, only like 30 kilometers far from here.
Any guesses?
Oh goodness. I would say maybe again, I'm gonna go for areas, right? I would think like sort of like like either like the Arabic world, or a little more like if we're looking in the Stan area of the world. And like in the Russia area. So I'm thinking that area of the world.
Yeah.
Was I right?
Yeah, it's a Slavic language. Yeah. Good job. We'll take
it. Thank you.
Yeah,
okay.
We'll take it.
I've just returned from another city.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'll play it one more time and then we'll let you jump in.
I've just returned from another city. The city's not very far from mine.
Things standing out to you?
Syllables are all very similar. I do think that he's trying to use pitch a little bit, and I think that we need a little bit more of a fall in there in some places. Everything tends to kind of stay up here. I think we need a little bit more falling, especially at the end of words. So I think a lot of people tend to do that. Even if you're trying to have those pitch changes, don't forget to fall. And I think that's what we're missing there, is that fall.
And we see that, for instance, on city. It's probably the word that stands out to me the most.
I've just returned from another city. The city's not very far from mine, only like 30 kilometers far from here.
Far from
I would even say mine. It's not very far from mine. It's far from here.
Yeah.
I've just returned from another city.
Like we're almost getting into that reduced E sound, like city versus like city. Just returned from another city.
I've just returned from another city. The city's
another thing too. So we have the thought group ending on city. Cool. And one of the things, this is a technique, you don't have to always do this, but one of the ways that you can kind of join thought groups together is to hold on to your final sound just a little bit longer.
I've just returned from another city.
You can hear that pause. So compared that, like city,
city,
the city that versus like city that. It's like city that. So just kind of lengthening the final sound before a thought group, and it's just what it does is it just kind of smooths things out. So then you're able to get from one section of your sentence to the next, and it makes it sound a little bit more flowing versus when you just have that pause.
This gets into, I always tell my students in general, vowels that end a word tend to be a little bit longer than the way other languages would say them. And the one that always gives a person away as a non-native speaker, getting back to some of those questions, is no. And hi. No and hi are the two that like are always kind of a tell for me, even if other people think that person sounds very native, like no. In English, we tend to say no, or hi instead of hi. No.
Yeah.
Those longer vowels at the end of a word, just working on that one thing can make you sound a lot more native and more fluent.
That also gets back to, again,
stretch the end of your word. I always say stretch the end of that word.
Yeah. And it also gets into that intonation stuff too. We're not just having a fall, but kind of adding a little bit of nuance, a little bit of waver to it. I definitely agree.
I've just returned from another city. The city's not very far from mine.
So I do like you. There is, like you mentioned, there is shifting going on. I just returned from another city, so like we're up here, and then we say the city is not far from mine. So again, there's shifting going on. It's great. It does not sound flat. Which is great.
Returned from another city. The city's not.
Again, I would just lengthen the E sound on city at the end in terms of vowel sounds.
Very far from mine.
The stress pattern here to me feels irregular. We'll play it again. See if that.
The city. The city's not very far from mine.
City is not very far from mine. City is not very far from mine. I probably wouldn't stress mine. I probably would stress far, personally. City's not very far. It's not very far from mine. Like it's not far from mine. Like
I would do it a little differently. I'd say the city's not very far from mine.
Another city. The city's not very far from mine.
Very far from mine. Like far from mine.
I always think that N is kind of throwing me off too a little bit. It sounds a little bit different than what I would expect. It sounds just like a little.
Placement's rising.
City's not very far from mine. Only 30.
The one on mine.
City.
Like
the city's not very far from mine.
Mine.
Instead of mine, like where it's kind of all kind of smooth and together instead of just mine. Like even though the I was longer, I'm trying to imitate it. Yeah.
It's not very far from mine. Only 30.
I wonder if the placement's kind of rising on that end, and I wonder if that's causing it.
30 kilometers far from here. Mine only 30 kilometers far from here.
30.
Like
okay. Yeah. I was gonna say I like the repetition of 30.
30 kilometers.
30. Yeah. I think it's a very natural technique. A lot of people are afraid to repeat, but native speakers do this all the time. They repeat a word and then they say a word and then they repeat it. A lot of times they'll play with the pitch, like they'll lower it or raise it. But I like that repetition there. Let's hear to hear again.
30 kilometers far from here.
Far from here. To me, it's to hear. I like the sound.
30 kilometers far from here.
I like that R sound. I think the R sound's really good.
Yeah.
It sounds overstressed.
I like the pitch on that here. I thought it was good.
Here? It sounds overstressed. It sounds overstressed to me. Hang on.
30 kilometers.
No, I liked the pitch on that one, actually. I would say it's something like that. It's not far from here.
But I don't... Is that how he's saying it, though?
30 kilometers far from here.
Far from here?
Here?
Like far from here? I wonder if it's... I want to hear from in contrast with here.
Kilometers far from here.
From here? Like from here? From here? Like that to me, that feels a little sharp on the rise. But... to each his own.
The from could be different. I was that here. I liked it because I think there was some nuance in the here.
So 30 kilometers far from here.
Far from here.
Here.
Like far from here. Because it's kind of poppy. I'm gonna pause this audio I'm gonna play everything to that point again to see if there's any final thoughts that you have on this file.
I've just returned from another city. The city's not very far from mine, only like 30 kilometers far from here.
Like a fast descent on kilometers.
If we're
Other
getting into
thing-
voice
yeah.
again, I feel like that's a theme from today. It sounds like all the words are starting from your mouth instead of starting from your chest. It almost feels like you're
Mm.
punching the words a little bit.
A little tight.
Yeah.
I've just returned from another city. The city's not very far from mine.
I like your stress on just.
I've just returned from another city.
Like I've just returned. It's super common. A lot of times when you see just put
Mhm.
before a verb, it is very, very frequent to stress just. Not always, but that's I think it's a very common pattern.
The city's not very far from mine, only like 30 kilometers far from here.
Also, like I think from mine, I think the
Not
linking was
very
good.
far from mine,
From mine, so just the one M sound. So I said like from mine. No, from mine. Good.
only like 30 kilometers far from here.
Far from here. And we do have a question about this too. Edward asks us, can you drop the H in here and say far from here? Like 30 kilometers far from here? I think it's
Can.
possible. It's anything is possible. I think it depends on speed and pace. Emmanuel makes a note only if it's stressed. That's true. In general, if you're stressed, you want the H. But I think you... In the way he's saying it now,
30 kilometers far from here.
the way he's saying it now, I think you kind of need the H. Personally.
I would say the H, but again, if we're getting into variations, I do hear some regional areas in the US where people would say far from here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think
Yeah,
so.
so do you
It
think-
just depends. I am liking this, like these little tiny pitch changes within a word. I think a lot of students really struggle with that. And I'm hearing it on mine and here. And it's just like this little subtle, like I'm hearing it and I'm here for
I
it
agree.
and I like it. So nice
Yeah.
work on that.
I would agree with that. Yeah. For the sake of time, I'm going to move us on to another file, but thanks to Elchin for sending that one. Okay. Also, some real quick questions. What have I missed? We talked about the flu. If you've typed in a question and I missed it, be sure to let me know. We did have one
Question.
YouTube user. How do you involve your diaphragm more, though? I can't feel it. One diaphragm exercise that you can try doing. I mean, if you look on my channel, we have a playlist just for breath exercises, and they're all about trying to engage the diaphragm. We have a whole playlist on the channel page. But one exercise you can try doing, for instance, is if you breathe in through your nose, and then exhale and say like shh, and really drag that out like as long as you can. It's like shh. And naturally, I would go longer, but just for the sake of today. And what you're going to feel as you do that is you're going to feel your stomach gradually contracting. Okay. So what that means is you are engaging your diaphragm when you do that. So ideally, when you're saying sentences, you kind of want to feel, you don't want to like tense your abs. That's not the goal. But you want to just kind of you want to have a little bit of that feeling in your diaphragm to be like, okay, I can feel as I'm saying this sentence, I'm making that slow contraction. Okay. Another way you can kind of measure this too is that if you adjust my angle really quick, if you take your hands or your knuckles, we're not going to fight. You guys would win, I promise. You're going to take your knuckles, you put them on your ribs, and then if you breathe in, see how everything just opened up there? So that's a sign that I'm engaging my diaphragm. And then when I exhale, everything contracts. Okay. So what a lot of students are doing when they're speaking in American English is they're not really even engaging their diaphragm much at all. Your lungs are doing a lot of the work, and you can tell because when you're talking, what's happening is you might expand, but you never contract. So we're just stuck in this open position. Whereas as you're talking, you want to have a very, very, very slow contraction as your ribs kind of start pulling together more. Because that's a couple quick ways you can kind of check to see if you're engaging your diaphragm as you talk. Jennifer, any other tips you can think of for engaging diaphragms?
This is hard for people. I even work on this with native speakers. So you are all not alone. And a lot of people just don't even know how to do it. So I think it's easiest just to start with breathing, just to kind of understand before you add anything else.
Yeah.
And I like to say, put your fingers like right here.
Mm-hmm.
And if you feel you're breathing all the way down into here, and this is kind of, you can feel it pushing on your fingers.
Yeah.
Then you know you're getting a deep enough breath. And then onto that, like you said, then it's just about try to breathe out and empty your lungs all the way from the bottom, and then fill it back up, and then try to say something.
Yeah. One exercise you can also, yeah. And you could hear that depth on that vibration. Yeah. Another technique too is like take like a paragraph, like a relatively, maybe like a 4 or 5 sentence paragraph. Try to say that whole paragraph in just one breath. And what's going to happen is you're going to run out of air. And as you run out of air, you're going to kind of feel your diaphragm start engaging more.
Sometimes singing helps people.
Yes.
And then also another trick is sometimes just visualizing that you're a different type of an instrument. Are you going to be a flute way up here? Or are you going to be more of a saxophone with air kind of having to flow further, which gives you that lower pitch? So that sometimes helps my students that play instruments.
I'm going to borrow that question. Are you a flute or a saxophone? That's a great, a great question to ask. One other thing too is that your posture has a huge impact on your sound. So for instance, if I say American English rewards good posture. So for instance, if I say an E sound, I'm going to say an E sound. I'm not going to change anything with my mouth. I'm just going to say an E. And as I say that E sound, I'm going to raise my shoulders and just listen to the difference. So like, you can hear it. When I'm higher, everything's really tense. Everything's closed off. I'm not allowing enough air through. My larynx is going up here. So everything's blocked off. So one automatic way to start sounding more natural, just have good posture, shoulders down, chest out a little bit, sit up straight. It has an impact.
Zoom meetings help us because you can see yourself starting to do this throughout a meeting.
Yeah.
Right. You could see me doing this. And then a lot of times you'll see me, I pop right back up because I'm like, I'm trying to get that. I'm starting to get that posture. So you are correct. So shoulders down is huge. Another tip that I tell people, if you're presenting to a big audience, I do making my videos, I kind of like hop on my toes a little bit. Like it kind of engages your core a little bit more. And that's like super helpful if you're struggling to get that diaphragm going. It's easier standing up than it is sitting down. And also feet on the floor helps. That's another one. Dangly feet makes it hard to do.
Yeah. I like what you mentioned about singing too. Like if you ever listened to like British singers like Adele or like Ozzy, and you notice when they sing, they sound American. Why are they sounding American? They're letting so much air through. And then they do an interview and immediately they sound British again as they close everything off again, So singing definitely opens things up 100%. I want to try to get through. Oh my gosh. Lumberjack gave a question. If I have time, I'll come back to that one because that's a long one. Realistic thinking. Thanks for the question. Are there more than one way of saying the another TH words depending on where it is?
That darn TH.
Yeah. What are your thoughts? Let's go TH. Come on. What you got?
Okay. I mean, ultimately, I think that like we talk about TH so much. And I think that, yes, I say my THs, but this is one of the sounds that's tolerated the most. And I think American English is variations on the TH. Unless you're saying a word that has a minimal pair. And what I mean by that, like worse and worth, you're going to be saying a different word completely. And that might change the meaning. But, I think that even I, in just conversational speech, don't really fully pronounce my TH like I'm doing it now because I'm in a class taking a class. And if it's linked, it's going to sound a little different. If it's, so I mean, I guess my big takeaway is don't get yourself too worked up over the TH. I think focus on a lot of other things first, and then focus on those words that you have to say that have that TH in them that you need. And that's going to, I think, help a lot because then that anxiety I feel like there's so much anxiety related to TH that if you get rid of the anxiety, then everything kind of smooths itself out. And I know that's like a weird answer, but it's true. Is that there's people so worried about it and trying to be
it has
perfect.
a reputation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what do you think? What's your 2 cents?
Yeah, I think people go hard on TH when they really don't need to. I think, in all honesty, it disappears a lot. For instance, one thing we talk about, when you have like an N sound that comes before a TH, a lot of times the TH will disappear. Like instead of saying like and then, which is just physically hard to say, and then, you know, one of the things, again, American English is really about breath. I'm trying to keep breath going from one sound to the next. That's my job as a speaker in general. TH oftentimes is getting in the way. So what often happens is that TH is going to get reduced. It's going to get weakened. Sometimes it might even disappear. So like, for instance, in the case of and then, what you're going to hear a lot of native speakers do is they're not going to say and then. They're going to say and then, and then. They're just repeating that N sound. And then, and then, and then. And you'll see that a lot with other N, TH sounds. And that will happen in other situations too. So the TH really isn't the most important part. It's really more about the vowels around the TH that you want to really try to get right, in my opinion.
Correct.
Yeah. One last question, then we'll keep going. Pablo asks us, caught with a long vowel or short vowel? A quick note with like, I hate the name long vowel. They really need to change the name because a lot of people, they hear long vowel and they're like, okay, so long vowel, I'll make it longer, or short vowel, make it really short. It's the same length, guys. Like vowels are the same length.
Yeah. I use long and short because that's how we teach reading in the US. And I have a lot of students who are parents. And so it really lends itself to that. And then also, you know, even on Google with Google Translate, a lot of times they'll sort of use the short, long vowel spelling patterns. I actually say caught, I would say with the medium vowel to like totally change up that question. And I think it does sound, I do think that a lot of my students perceive vowels as shorter and longer, even though they are technically all the same length. And I think it gets more into tension. So it gets back to, I don't care what you call it, as long as you hear it. So a lot of my students hear short, medium, and long vowels, and they say this is medium because we open our mouth, caught. So anyway, I can't really answer that question. You are right. Yeah. The short and long is hard, but I do use it as a teaching tool.
Got you. In terms of how I personally would say caught, I would say caught. I use an aw sound. My wife is from the Midwest. There's that great Midwestern vowel shift going on. She's using like caught. So you will hear people using ah or an aw. What I will say is that if you're trying to decide, do I say caught? Do I say caught? Which do I use? In a lot of ways, it doesn't really matter because people I'll put it this way. There's no words in English where if you use an ah sound versus an aw sound, people are going to be confused. And honestly, people aren't even really going to notice, in all honesty, unless you get people.
I always just say, open your mouth. Don't say cut. No. As long as you don't say cut, you're good.
Just don't say cut. I think that's really fair. Okay, I want to get to some more files. Give me a second. Let's pop this back up. Thanks, Pablo, for the question. What we have here, is this the one we listened to?
If you were to rate these three, sorry, these four flavors, what's your order?
Okay, I'm going to pause there because I think there's a lot to even just talk about in that section. I want to play that back actually without the text.
If you were to rate these three, sorry, these four flavors, if you were to rate these three, sorry, these four flavors.
I'm going to be honest. I saw the text. No, I'm very biased. But I feel like if someone walked up to me on the street and said that right away, I might have to ask them to repeat themselves.
I didn't get it, to be honest. Play it one more time.
Yeah.
If you were to rate these three, sorry, these.
If you're registry flavors, that's what I got.
Got you.
If you were to rate these three.
When I tell you what it is, you're going to be like, oh, now I hear it. But I want to see.
Play it one more time?
Yeah.
If you were to rate these three.
I'll play it again.
If you were to rate these three.
If you were to rate these three. If you were to rate.
I got registry. Yeah. Rate these three.
If you were to rate these three.
Yeah. So here's the actual text. Let's talk about this part. And even other people saying, you said, if you raid this tree, oh my gosh, we get all kinds of things. Oh no. And then we're getting all kinds of things. YouTube user, oh my gosh. No, it's rates. If you were to rate these three, if you were to rate, so how would we help this sentence not be so ambiguous?
If you were to rate these three.
If you were to, I think it's a little too slurry.
You need some contrast.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And again, do you want to go louder, longer, or pitched? But you need something.
If you were to rate these.
If you were to rate, because what's happening, so those first three words I think are in my opinion, I think that's where the problem is starting.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're because I'm just looking at the chat and people are hearing all kinds of things that you probably don't want your listener interpreting.
If you were to rate,
like you are.
If you were to rate,
so if I don't think if is the problem, so I think it's the you were.
If you were to rate these,
because I can hear the F.
If you were to rate,
if you were, I think we need a little bit more you sound on you. Like if you were, because I feel like maybe our lips stayed a little too straight. If you were versus if you were.
I do feel like that "ya" in there is throwing me. If you were, I would do you were. So I think linking those two together makes that a lot longer. You were, because you have those like almost two W's there. You were. Mm-hmm. If you were to rate these three.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to rate.
You were, yeah, I mean, the W just got dropped. There's just no W.
If you were to rate.
If you were versus if you were, yeah, I think just adding, as difficult as it is, just based on what I'm saying from the chat and things like that, for people to get what was said here, I don't think it would actually take much for this to become understandable. I think again, just adding a very slight W sound would have been perfect, and I don't think we would have had an issue for that part.
If you were,
because what's happening is your first three words are just all blending together. Versus like if you were, so just a very quick "was" sound. Again, and also a little bit on that "you." Other questions on that part?
I just want to comment that for a lot of my students who are struggling just kind of with that general clarity, especially at like on a certain sentence or a certain word. Mm-hmm. A lot of times if I just say, okay, focus on moving your mouth more when you say it this time, that's such an easy fix. Again, if you're looking for something easy and some of these things are a little too complex for you, if all else fails, try that. And a lot of times that really helps. And I think if he just would have moved his mouth a little bit more, he might have gotten there. It might not have been perfect, but I think there would have been, it would have been clearer.
A little bit more clarity. Yeah. The other issue that just based on people's comments and things like that for the word rate. So rate these. Let's see how we're getting from one to the other. So we're here.
If you were to rate these three, these. If you were to rate these three.
These three is very clear.
If you were to rate these three.
I didn't say they were very clear. I got
registry. Really? You have an issue? Okay.
That's what I got with registry. So I heard a J in there. And I do think that this goes back to actually, instead of trying to get fancy with pitch, I think if you just started to focus on those vowels a little bit more, again, if you're kind of struggling with clarity, and I have a lot of students like this, really focus on those vowels. I think you said this before. If you can make some of these vowels different, and again, as a learner, you really need to kind of grasp something. And I know that we can talk in all these generalities about everything's kind of the same, which they technically are. But if you really focus on rate needs to be longer, these needs a longer vowel, three needs to be longer. And again, it would go back to just, if you were to rate these three and add a pause in there, I think that would have been a lot clearer. So a pause and longer vowels, because there's just not a lot of contrast there. Everything's the same. I got registry instead of rate these three. I wouldn't have stressed these. And that's the syllable that I heard. Even though I heard it as a syllable instead of a.
Let me hear that again.
If you were to rate these three.
So for me, like I'm hearing, yeah, that's what I'm hearing, that pattern. Yeah. I'm wondering if that maybe you've even gone a little higher in pitch. Like if you were to rate these three, because right now everything's a little bit muted, because like rate right now is maybe even a little bit lower pitched than if. Like if you were, or maybe the you were.
If you were to rate these,
so right now you is kind of your highest pitch.
if you were to rate these three,
if you were to rate these three, like if you were to rate these,
But you just made your vowel longer. Rate,
yeah, and also, yeah.
With the pitch as well.
Mhm.
So this,
Yeah.
like when I listen to it more, it either sounds like red or reg or
You
red.
saying it's like a minimal
Like
pair.
I'm not hearing
sounds
that
like an
A at all.
Yeah. Yeah. So also maybe watching out for some minimal pairs there. So like even just based on other people's comments too, other people hearing some similar things. So like maybe just comparing, typing in some minimal pairs here.
And I hear this street to me too. Like when people put that in the chat, also keep in mind our brain puts in there words that we kind of know. And so like some things that people are hearing, let's say you just read an article about something, that word could be in your head and you're thinking about that, certain words that can kind of cloud your judgment. I just kept hearing registry.
Yeah. So just kind of watching out for these minimal pairs here. It's like a red raid, a west waste, a met mate. So just watching out for those. Other people hearing the streets. I'm trying to. Can I get the streets? I want to hear that. Hang on.
If you were to rate these three,
these.
I get that, these streets.
I didn't hear it originally, but now that like people have said that, like I could see.
Yeah.
If you were to rate these three,
So 3.
If you were to rate these three,
yeah, TH on 3 would benefit by being slightly longer.
And
when I say
like
slightly,
Nelson's comment. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go on. No, you're good. You're good. Stop T.
Nelson, I like that. I do think that in some cases a T is super important, even though like we kind of gloss over it. I think I do have a lot of students who people don't understand them. And a super quick thing is to just use less flaps. There are certain languages that use a lot of flap sounds. And so, the R, the L, and the T all start to sound like a D. And then if someone isn't familiar with your language background, all that person is hearing, let's say we're talking about an American, you're just hearing D, 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 D. And then it's like, what? So again, it gets into, we would have more contrasts with the R, the L, and the T. There would be bigger contrasts, bigger differences, and all we're hearing is D. So I like that comment.
Yeah. Nelson also mentioned this tree. That's what I'm hearing. Like I'm hearing rate this tree. I definitely heard that.
If you were to rate these three,
it sounds like these instead of this, but yeah, like I could definitely hear tree. So paying attention to some of those, lots of interesting notes there on contrast and things like that I think will be really beneficial there. Thank you for sending this file. I'm going to keep us rolling. Next one here.
Again.
Oh, we did that one already. Oh, okay, let's pull up another one. Let me see. Just going to pick at random here.
When a blogger uses image without permission, the artist issued a cease and desist.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing that one. Can you play that again?
I think we all. The one thing is, I think it's interesting that you mentioned in the last file about, your mind is primed for things. So then when it hears things, it can piece things together, which can work for or against you. Because I'll be honest, I had a hard time hearing part of it, but then when you said desist, then I knew, okay, so the first part is to cease. So I'm able to group things together, which was helpful. But let's hear this again.
When a blogger uses image without permission, the artist issued a cease and desist.
Okay.
I'm just having trouble hearing the file altogether.
Some of this is volume related. I want to just see text, see if that helps.
While you're pulling that up, because I also work with kids, and I get a lot of referrals from parents saying, oh my gosh, no one understands my kid. And a lot of it is context. Kids don't set a context. when they're little, like little toddlers. And so it's not that you don't understand them. It's just sometimes they come in the room and they're talking about something that you have no idea. And then as soon as you get a little background, you're like, oh. So don't forget, if people are struggling to understand you, sometimes just setting a strong context for someone is super helpful. And then like if you're shifting the topic, okay, excuse me, I want to start talking about this, in this meeting. That's super helpful. That's a good, quick strategy.
Yeah. Also, for those of you who are studying listening, you're like, I want to improve my listening. Something that's super helpful for listening is choose a topic, choose the topic and then choose the material you're going to listen. Because just knowing the topic primes you so much. Because if I just give you a random listening, that's going to be really hard. Because you're like, I have no idea what it's going to talk about. But if you're like, okay, we're going to talk about technology, or we're going to be talking about AI, your mind just gets ready. Okay, it primes itself. I know let me get my tech vocab ready.
And I always say it has nothing to do with English. Think about what you would do in your native language. If you picked up a new book and you just started reading it, sometimes it's a little hard to get through the beginning. But if you've read the summary and you're like, oh, this is what this is about, then sometimes it's a little bit easier to get through. So context is king.
Yeah, priming is always helpful. Also, just a quick question. Lumberjacks, okay, American Understudy. Are you working here? I'm working now. That is a reduction that's very frequent for NG to just N. That's a super common reduction. Okay, I'm going to play this audio file one more time. See if there's anything we can. Some of this is volume related. It's not you. It's the technology.
No, I'm just having trouble hearing it is all.
When a blogger uses image without permission,
that everything after blogger down to permission is kind of lost. Okay, just to note everything from that part. So let's
do the second part because I can kind of hear the artist issued.
Okay, I want to hear blogger really quick. Then I'll jump to the ending.
When a blogger
I will say that your placement's going really high in that blogger versus gur. When the blogger, I do think you get a little bit more air through.
When a blogger,
because that's a very final. I would definitely take a look at your R sound to make sure you're saying R. It's not like because that's really close. So just watch out for that breath. But let's jump to the ending.
Permission. The artist issued a cease and desist.
You can hear the placement rise as well on ceased.
Actually, that second part was decent from what I can hear.
There you go.
The artist issued a cease and desist. The artist issued a cease and desist.
I really love the cease and desist. I love that. That was kind of stressed and then you paused and then you had and desist.
I like the pattern. Yeah, the pattern's good.
Again, this could be volume related. I heard and assist.
So
but again, it's the volume's not great.
To me, it almost sounds like deceased. I'm hearing a lot of E sounds.
And desist. Cease and desist.
Deceased versus like desist. Cease and desist.
Cease and desist.
I think cease to me, the placement sounds really, really high. I'm getting like an E versus like an E. It's like cease versus cease. But I do like like you mentioned, I do like the pitch. I think the rhythm there is pretty good. Desist. I feel like I'm hearing I want to hear that final short I sound.
Cease and desist. Cease and desist.
Or maybe it's not the short I. It's actually the first. Are you hearing duh or are you hearing D? Because I almost feel like I'm hearing D.
A cease and desist.
I feel like I'm hearing deceased.
It's really hard for me to hear that.
But the audio is a little too loud. Okay.
Yeah.
I might have to move on to another file. But any last questions or comments on this one?
No, I mean I commented on kind of what I could, parse out.
That's fair. Yeah, I would say watch out for placement because to me placement sounds a little high for some of these sounds. The air's getting a little blocked. Let's try to do one more really quick. Also, just quick question from Wallace. How do names pronounce for all of our? How would you say the phrase, Jennifer, for all of our?
For all of our. For all of our.
Okay. Yep. I would personally say it as for all of our. So my V would be a little softer. But you could also go super clear for all of our. There's a million ways to do it. Depends how much linking you want to do and how much reductions you want to do. But yeah,
you know
another
my
thing
opinion by now. Go for clear instead of fancy, especially if you're in a business meeting. But other than that, or if you're working at the drive-thru.
Yes, like work, public speaking engagements, things like that. Clarity is probably going to be your best friend in terms of like conversation. Like, again, what English are you going for? You going for conversational, talk to your friends?
Right.
You going for the context is always going to be the key there. One other question, and we'll jump to audio. Can the A for as be a schwa? Yes, like as far as that's a super common reduction. Like as far as and things like that. By what a schwa or the schwa? Do you use or the with schwa? You can use an I never heard a rule that you have to use a definite article. Have you? Like I would say like you need a schwa, like a schwa sound, or you need a schwa. You can use an indefinite.
Yeah.
I've never. Okay, you can use an indefinite article. Like use a schwa.
I guess I say both. I've never thought about that. That's an interesting question.
I haven't either. Yeah. It's catching me off guard. I'm nervous, but
yeah. I also want to comment quickly on the schwa.
Please.
I get this question so often. Is a schwa it or eh? Americans say it differently, and so I think just going for like short, quick, like relaxed vowel is all that you need to think about.
Yeah. I think I have to run to a class, so I think I'm actually going to have to pause this here. For those of you who have sent audio files, my apologies. We appreciate it. Got overwhelmed with like questions and things like that. I has makes to note all the words that end ly naturally, actually, really. How would you say these words, Jennifer? Naturally, actually, really.
Naturally, actually, really. I do say an L.
Yeah, yours is slightly firmer. I lean into the dark L. I go hard into it. Naturally, actually, really.
I know that you were, I think, in one of my live classes, and you brought this up. I really use a dark L, and so I overcorrect and use a very light L most of the time on purpose, because dark L's sometimes make you difficult to understand. And I'm all about clear, and so I really just used kind of that light L as much as possible.
Yeah, I'm all about linking and reductions. I'm kind of the opposite of clear. So if you want to join these together, what you're going to get is naturally, actually, really. But what I will say, a dark L is not a silent L, just a note.
No.
It's an all sound. It's not just taking off the L. Okay, so just a note on that. Other real quick questions. Pull, pool. Pull, pool. How would you say these, Jennifer?
I say them differently. I say pool,
Let's go.
Pool.
Okay. It's different, but it's not like that different. No.
It sounded like you. How do you say the first one?
Pull. Like pull it.
Pull.
Well, again with the L. I mean the L's again.
Yeah.
Creeping in. It all depends. How hard do you want to go into your dark L? How much do you want to embrace?
Right.
How much do you want to do it? Last question here. What do you got? Oh, what you got? Like this.
Both. I hear both.
Okay.
I think I would say, what do you have? But I think if I'm trying to be like hip, because again, I work with kids, I'd say sometimes like, what you got for me today, or something like that. The kids are always telling me I say things like an old lady. So again, language changes.
Oh, that's
These
great.
are teenagers. That's what they say. I'm like, oh my goodness, but
Yeah.
Everybody has an opinion.
I definitely use again, context, code switching, professional settings, and things like that. If you're leading, it depends on context too, because even in those settings, it might be okay. But
right.
But so is it okay? It can be.
Yeah.
Guys, I have to run. I'm sorry, guys.
Okay, this was so much fun. Thank you for having me.
Yes, guys, be sure to check out Tarl. You can check out her channel and things like that for Tarl Speech. She has all kinds of services, Udemy courses. She's fancy like that. It's got other things for you. Jennifer, it has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. And take care. And everyone, have a great weekend.
Hey, take care, everyone. Thank you so much for your time. We'll see
Take
you
care.
next time.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye.